Hello everyone, as you read from the title, I'm going to see if it is possible to beat the entirety of Final Fantasy VII Remake as a Toad. If you want to see more videos from me, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment, and without any further ado, let's get on with the challenge. So basically, for those of you that don't know, there's a status effect in Final Fantasy VII called Toad, which as the name implies, turns your character into a Toad. Toad in the original game and in Remake makes your characters almost completely useless. You cannot use magic, items, weapons, and in Remake you only have one command move, which is Leapfrog. So now you might be thinking, okay, but how can you play the entire game as a Toad? Well, in Final Fantasy VII, taking a chapter out of Dark Souls' book, there's a ring in the game that just makes you worse. While in Dark Souls, it is called the Calamity Ring and makes you take double damage. In Final Fantasy VII, it is the Enfeeblement Ring, which makes you start battles as a Toad. I will be wearing the ring on all three characters for the entirety of the game and seeing if it would be possible to beat the game in this manner. I'll be playing the game on normal difficulty, and if I manage to beat it, and you guys want to see more videos from me, I might just have to try a hard mode run in the future. Since there isn't a lot of strategy to being a Toad, and you just only have 3 moves and you're just not very good, the challenge is more of an endurance test. My characters are all maxed out from my other playthroughs, so the main challenge will be hitting enemies you can normally only reach with range attacks, and dealing enough damage to bosses to win before running out of HP. Instead of going over each individual battle, I'll mostly highlight roadblocks, bosses, and if I'm cruising through the chapters, I'll move through that quickly so we can get on to the more exciting parts of the challenge. And when thinking about this challenge, I almost thought it'd be impossible to start off with because of the first battle with Barret. And so that's just where we're going to start the video off.
Well, so much for having Cloud do all the fighting. There are some places a sword just can't reach. Just bear with him for me, would you?
So this fight is supposed to be an introduction to enemies that only Barret or Aerith can hit with basic attacks. However, we are Toads. This fight gave me a valuable lesson, however. First, this is going to be one of the few fights I showed its entire duration, just to show you how much being a Toad sucks. This fight showed me that the Toad, while being terrible, has hella range. I thought the Toad would just hop around, but the tongue attack at the beginning of the 3-hit combo has tons of range. It hits so far. The only problem is that this is only at the beginning of a combo, so you're going to see me flailing around trying to hit them. I hit them with the tongue, and then I just keep missing because I'm not realizing that it's only the first hit of the combo, but I get it pretty quickly. So the whole strategy to this fight is being able to pause and attack and pause and attack and be in the proper position for the tongue to even hit them, because while it has range, it's not that good. You're still a Toad, so you really have to position yourself carefully. Not that I'm taking much damage because I'm such a high level, but because it just wastes time if I can't kill them. But after doing all that, I was able to actually beat this fight that I thought might be a run killer and continue towards the destruction of Mako Reactor 1 and on to the first boss fight.
All done. Cocky little bastard, ain't you? You double-crossing! Heads up. What in the hell?
The Scorpion Sentinel boss fight, in all honesty, was very easy. I thought the balance for this challenge would be, I'm on normal difficulty as of right now, maybe future hard mode playthrough, you never know, and but I'm a Toad, so I was like, I should give myself a little advantage and be high level, and it's really showing at the beginning of the playthrough so far, because my pure stats are making, even as a Toad, making the party do just enough damage to where things are pretty playable as of right now. I was even able to stagger the Scorpion Sentinel, and after flipping my way away from its tail laser, Barret and Cloud beat the boss and make their way to the next chapter.
Can you walk?
If I couldn't, believe me, you'd be the first to know.
I'll take that as a yes.
Okay, that was pretty cool. Alright, come on.
Chapter 2 is a pretty cutscene heavy chapter with some fighting towards the middle and end. Cloud is alone for this chapter of the game, but it doesn't really make a difference for this challenge, as Toad Cloud is able to steamroll past the basic guard enemies. Use of Bubble Breath is able to beat the shield wielders who you would usually only be able to damage with magic. After beating all the guards, it is on to Chapter 3, the first chapter with side quests, which I will be attempting.
Give me a break. I'm not a salesman. I'm a soldier.
Which is why no one will refuse to pay. What do you say? Please?
Let's get this over with.
Great.
Chapter 3 is no biggie. We help some people out.
This sucks.
We do all the
Honestly,
side
I'm
quests.
feeling pretty good. Marl isn't always right, you know.
And then it's on to
This
Chapter
is gonna be so
4.
much fun. You'll see. You passed the test.
What test?
Driving.
Been driving for years.
So you don't need a reward?
No.
Chapter 4, for the purposes of the Toad Challenge, doesn't start until after the bike minigame, but as you saw, I still killed that shit anyways. Jesse wants to break into the 7-6 Annex, and it's our job to distract the waves of guards and eventually beat Roach in a 1v1 as the boss of the chapter. This is supposed to be a tutorial to use summons and to take down all the waves of enemies, but obviously we're a Toad, so we just hop around very slowly, taking out all the enemies one after another. The boss fight with Roach is actually the easiest part of the chapter. A lot of the time he can't even hit you, as he's a boss who usually responds to your movement and uses stab attacks, but we're a tiny toad, so we just hop around and use a leapfrog for the win. After escaping the Annex with the gang, we prepare for the next mission and the first fight against the Whispers, which goes surprisingly well, as they can't put up much of a fight, and can't even use their binding move on the Toads. With Jesse and Wedge hurt in the last chapter, it is up to Cloud and Tifa to join Barrett in the destruction of Mako Reactor 5.
Feels like we're flying high these days.
Now, more than ever.
He's a keeper, all right.
Yeah! Together, we can take on the world!
The next few chapters of the game are pretty combat-heavy chapters. Chapter 5 is the first chapter you have a full party and sees you running through tunnels and culminates in a boss fight with the Crab Warden, which, with the power of triple leapfrog, is easy peasy for the team of Toads. Chapter 6 can be summarized by this.
Error. Insufficient power.
Of course.
Fight a bunch of normal enemies, make sure to have good positioning for the enemies that are placed up high, and move on to Chapter 7. I'm a bit worried about this one, and if you played the game, then you know why.
Now let us raise the curtain on our main event. The trial of the eco-extremist group Avalanche. Terrorists conspired with Wukai against Midgard. Your guilt is undeniable. Your punishment, death.
Chapter 7 is a big turning point in the story and for this video. This is the first real boss in the game that has a chance to take out the Toad Gang if we aren't careful. The whole run-up to the boss isn't really worth talking about as the enemies aren't much of a threat. I will say though, I figured the best way to handle this boss fight was to get rid of its movement options. The Airbuster is unique in that you can fight it in many different ways by sabotaging different parts of its body during the run-up. For this fight I got rid of one of the M units, one big bomber, and all of its AI programming cores, which is why you'll see during the gameplay that it isn't moving around very much at all. The boss fight is split up into two phases, the ground phase and then the air phase. The ground phase is simple enough, as you should just waylay on the air buster while occasionally dodging away as fast as you can from the tank buster attack and the big bomber attack. The air phase is a little more tricky, as a lot of the time only the character you can control will be able to hit the air buster, and just barely too. But still, the range on these toads is crazy. The fact that the toads can hit the air buster at all during this part is nuts. After the airbuster lands, it's back to hitting it as much as possible with the leapfrog ability, as that attack will be your best friend during this run. Not like we have many options though. After defeating the airbuster, Cloud is separated from the party, and a fateful reunion occurs.
We don't have long to get clear.
Take Tifa and get out of here.
I was wrong about you.
This ain't the end of the line for you or me.
Cloud!
Come on!
Chapter 8 has you meeting up with Aerith once again, and along with Chapter 9 are most people's favorite chapters of the game. The first fight of this chapter is Reno. As these two chapters are the longest in the game, I'm going to try to highlight everything important while still trying to keep it brief. Reno, like most of the human enemies in the game, aren't much of an issue. Cloud just has to keep using Leapfrog. After beating Reno and escaping from the church, Cloud and Aerith begin their journey together, hopping rooftops and making their way to Sector 5.
My hero. This is my mom.
Aerith and Cloud working together make their way to Sector 5 where Aerith lives, and she convinces Cloud to try helping out the people of Sector 5. And of course, we're going to try all of the side quests.
I'll do it for 3 gil. I'm offering a special discount right now on Toad King jobs. Looks like it's your lucky day.
Awesome! Now that's my kind of bargain. I wish you luck, brave warrior.
Unfortunately, Toad, Cloud, and Aerith actually run into some trouble while doing the side quests. The box-breaking minigame Whack-A-Box is basically impossible, at least I couldn't do it as a Toad. You need to hit a minimum score, I'm guessing the score for the first prize to complete the quest. However, as you should be seeing on screen, the Toad just isn't strong enough for this minigame, so we have met our first match. Sorry Whack-A-Box, it's just not possible. The next and final side quest I thought was worth mentioning was a side quest where you clear the graveyard. This is actually the first time I've lost a fight in this run, and I had to retry multiple times. These enemies inflict poison, and even with the ridiculous amount of HP we have, the Toads just can't deal enough damage to beat the enemy before dying to the poison. So the only way I was able to beat this fight was to use items to heal, for the first time in this challenge. Other than those two side quests, the rest were pretty easy, and we move on to the final boss of the chapter, Rude.
Hello, Aerith.
What do you want?
Haven't seen him before. He your new boy toy?
He's my
Boy toy?
if you must know.
Rude, like Reno, is pretty easy, so after beating him we move on to Chapter 9 and the road to Wall Market.
Well, today's special. That's why I've been working my butt off.
What's so special about it?
Okay, time to go.
Learn to talk to her.
Did the flowers say anything?
Good work today, guys?
That's the spirit.
Chapter 9 starts with Cloud and Aerith making their way through the collapsed expressway to get to Wall Market in Sector 7. The enemies here aren't a challenge for them though, and they keep moving on until they get to Sector 7. At the gate of Sector 7, they meet Tifa and decide to save her from Don Corneo, and this is where the real bulk of the chapter starts. There's usually a lot to go over, but this video is mostly concerned about combat, and oh boy is there combat in this chapter. To earn the favor of Madame M and win Aerith a dress, the gang competes in the Corneo Cup at the Coliseum. The first few battles are easy, and then there's the finale, the Hell House. This fight took almost 30 minutes. It's already a pretty long fight in the main game, but with Toad strats, it just takes so long. The house is resistant to all physical damage, so the strat is just to spam Bubble Breath as much as possible, which locks you into a super slow animation. The attack is a projectile with super long travel time, and the boss can fly. Also, later in the fight, the Hell House uses God House mode, which makes it resist everything we can do, including Bubble Breath. So this fight comes down to surviving long enough to very slowly whittle down the health of Hell House while it jumps around, resists your attack, and is only not resistant to Bubble Breath for a second or two at a time. I knew this boss would be rough as a Toad, but yeah, this was pretty bad. For people wondering if they should try this challenge, only do it if you really love this game and are really bored. Sometimes in fights there is strategy, but usually that strategy is spamming one thing instead of another thing. Anyways, after a long battle and a minimal amount of healing items and no deaths, Cloud and Aerith beat the Hell House and win the cup.
We did it!
And the winners and champions, Cloud and Aerith!
After the Corneo Cup, Cloud is separated from Aerith as she is getting changed and goes on some side quests.
Wait, the sauce.
The sauce?
Stop saying the sauce.
After that, some other cool stuff happens that doesn't really need to be shown for this video, but I'm gonna show some clips anyway because it is way too cool and, you know, it's my video.
But you're so pretty!
Wait a minute. Cloud? Is that you? Oh my god, that makeup! And that dress!
Nailed it, I know, thank you. Moving on.
Well, you better. 'Cause if you don't, I'll rip them off!
After falling to the sewer thanks to the ever-classy Don Corneo, so begins Chapter 10. The next few chapters are pretty short. Chapter 10's boss fight happens right at the beginning against the Abzu, who really isn't much of an issue. I put on the elemental materia junction with the fire materia, which Abzu is weak to, and actually most enemies in the game are weak to fire for that matter. Highly recommend having that on a character 99% of the time. And with that, the gang makes their way out of the sewer and into the train graveyard.
But it'll be fine! We've got a bodyguard, don't forget. Mine. Right?
Train Graveyard has 2 boss fights, and none of the other battles are worth talking about as usual, and this video is getting pretty long already. If you made it this far, comment, "You owe me a pizza." Only real ones will know. Anyways, the first boss is pretty similar to the Hell House in that it has multiple modes, however the ghoul is so much easier. As long as you dodge the hard-hitting explosive attacks, you just rotate between hitting it with Leapfrog and hitting it with Bubble Breath, as it can only be hit by either physical or magic damage at any given time, and will rotate between being immune to either or. Boy am I glad the Toad mode has built-in magic attack. The second boss is the Eligor, which for this run is super annoying. Second most annoying so far behind the Hell House. Eligor can fly, so you can only hit it with the tongue attack whenever it is in the air, so you'll spend most of the fight hitting it every 2 seconds for barely any damage until it eventually lands, and you can start using Leapfrog on it again to destroy its HP. After defeating Eligor, it is on to Chapter 12.
Testing. Attention, Avalanche Scum. We know all about your evil plans to destroy the pillar, but the Turks, but Shinra, that's us, won't let you get away with it. So go crawl back into whatever hole you crawled out of, or something. That ought to do it, right?
The goal is to ascend the plate support pillar and stop Shinra from dropping the Sector 7 plate on the Undercity. Aerith leaves the party at this point in the game to help Marlene, and she eventually gets captured by Shinra. So Cloud and eventually Tifa make their way up the pillar, seeing sad sights along the way. When they get to the top, Barret joins the party and we have the boss fight of the chapter, the Turk duo, Reno and Rude.
You. It's nothing personal, bitch!
The fight starts off against Reno while Rude is supporting from the sky in a helicopter. It's pretty easy as the Toad should just spam leapfrog to whittle him down. I also had lightning and elemental materia on my armor, so I was absorbing Reno's lightning attacks. After Reno is beaten, you have to very slowly whittle down the helicopter that Rude is flying, and once you finally beat it, the real fight starts.
Lift your wings, huh? I was planning to join you anyway. Any landing you can walk away from.
The Turk duo is much stronger when fighting side by side. However, with the elemental materia junction to wind on Barret's weapon, Rude goes down easily, and eventually Reno does as well. There's only one human boss that I'm worried about facing, but even this human boss fight, probably the second hardest in the game, normally isn't too much trouble.
Jesse! God damn it! God damn you! God damn you all! Molly.
After escaping the collapsed plate, the first half of Chapter 13 is walking and cutscenes. Eventually the gang gets back inside the destroyed sector and finds an underground Shinra lab. Once inside, the party is split up and you play as just Barret, and then Barret and Tifa for the end of the lab and the boss fight. The boss failed experiment is pretty simple. You just attack its back and then attack its core, while trying not to be overwhelmed by the other smaller failed experiments running around and attacking you, and healing the boss. After that, it's on to the final chapter with side quests, Chapter 14.
Do I get a say in all this?
It's almost morning. Time to go.
I'm coming for you.
Chapter 14 is a pretty eventful chapter for this challenge. There are a few side quests worth mentioning. The first would be the battle against the Rust Drake to save one of Sam's chocobos. This battle was super annoying as the Rust Drake is constantly flying, making it super hard to hit. It also casts Black Hole to hinder the party's movements. And finally, the icing on the cake is that it can cast Gravity, reducing the team's HP to almost nothing in one hit. It is a battle of attrition where you slowly weaken the enemy with only one character since the other two are busy getting hit by Black Hole, and with a decent amount of healing, I was able to get it done. The next side quest would be the fight against the Tonberry. If you know Final Fantasy, you know why the Tonberry is a big deal. Its entire gimmick is that it can one-shot you. With some patience and some Phoenix Downs though, it's a pretty easy win. The final side quest worth mentioning for this chapter is going to be the fight against the Type 0 behemoth. It does a lot of damage, but the goal is to break its body parts and slowly whittle away while trying to dodge its fast and hard-hitting moves. And make sure to heal up right before it uses Meteor so it doesn't wipe you after you've already won. After beating all the side quests, we move back into the sewers,
When you're good to go, let me know.
where we help Wesley get revenge on the Dawn in exchange for a way to get topside. Running through the sewers is pretty straightforward, but then we get to the boss fight of the chapter. Abzu Part 2. This fight is the hardest in the game by far, at least so far. Abzu does a lot of damage and its water attacks poison the team, which, as we already saw, is pretty rough. Abzu also summons tons of Abzu shotes during the fight that will get in the way and gang up on the party. I wasn't able to break a horn during the first Abzu fight, and that made this fight even harder. Breaking a horn makes it so that Abzu can only use its best attack on one side of the arena, but with both horns it hits basically the entire arena, and the CPU toads are almost guaranteed to get hit, or if they're weak enough, die from the attack. The strategy was really just to survive and very slowly beat up Abzu with my fire-infused attacks. I made sure to try to kill the Abzu shotes as well, not only to get them out of the way, but to also gain ATB to use on the boss, since sometimes the boss gets out of range. I had an extremely close call at the end, or if I didn't beat the Abzu in time, the party probably would have wiped, but the Toad Gang made it through.
You can practically fly with the souped-up motors on these babies.
With the grappling guns Wesley gave us in hands, the team make their way up the wall and onto the destroyed city.
Two goals. Goal 1, kick some Shinra ass and save the planet. Goal 2, save the girl while kicking more Shinra ass and get out.
Copy.
Chapter 15 is a pretty short chapter that has the gang traversing the collapsed Sector 7 plate with the goal of reaching Sector 0 in the Shinra building. There are a lot of flying enemies in this chapter that are really annoying to deal with, as per usual, and the damage that these enemies can do has really started to ramp up. The chapter has one boss fight, the Valkyrie. The first part of the fight is really annoying as it only flies around, so you have to sit and very slowly whittle it down. However, the next part is actually pretty cool. It will land and can be staggered by leapfrog, and you can use its own attack against it, which is a giant lightning Kirin style attack to deal massive damage and increase the stagger gauge. After beating the Valkyrie, it's on to chapter 16. Chapter 16 starts with a pretty combat-focused beginning where the gang breaks into the Shinra building through the parking garage, taking on waves of guards and third-class soldiers with the goal of making it inside. Once inside the Shinra building, the gang needs to ascend. I took the stairs in this playthrough because I think it's pretty funny.
You have got to be shitting me.
After a nice tour of the Shinra building, the team finds Professor Hojo and proceeds to fight the boss of the chapter, Specimen H0512. This guy was actually decently tough, mostly because of the high damage from his charging attacks, and his love of using poison attacks to drain the Toad's HP. The strategy I used was to keep breaking its left claw, which gets rid of some of its stronger moves, and ignore the smaller specimens as they didn't pose much threat. The boss HP is really high compared to the amount of damage we do at this point in the game, and these boss fights are getting longer and longer every time. Nothing as long as the Hell House yet, though. After beating this dude, and beating the task force that somehow Hojo thought could beat the gang saves Aerith, and it's time to make an escape.
The Shinra Electric Power Company isn't the real enemy. It started with them, sure, but I promise you, there's a much bigger threat.
Chapter 17 is probably the longest chapter in the game. Tons of boss fights, lots of fighting using every character, except for 13, which is big sad, and there's a lot to talk about. For the sake of pacing this video, there may be less talking about the story than usual, even though I've already been skimming just to give context anyways. Long story short, Shinra Bad must escape the building to save Aerith. The first fight I want to talk about is the Sledgeworms versus Barret and Cloud. I hate this fight. It's bad no matter how you play, normal, hard, as a Toad, it doesn't matter. It's straight garbage. They deal so much damage. The strategy is just hit them when you can, dodge their specials, and hope you don't die from 1,000 cuts from their homing attacks. Right after this is the first boss, the Brain Pod. The Brain Pod is pretty straightforward. Go to town with the lightning-based attacks, and when it splits up into multiple Brain Pods, just mash Leapfrog for the dub. Next up, Red 13 gets separated from the party, and it's up to Tifa and Aerith to save him. This part is on a timer, and you have to fight more sludge worms. And Toad Aerith's become terrible at this point in the game. I was able to do it with some time to spare, but man, I was a little worried I wasn't gonna make it because those sludge worms are so annoying to deal with. The next boss fight, and the final one for the drum part of this chapter, is the Swordipede, which takes both parties to defeat. Swordipede is actually pretty easy. Attack its head to damage it, dodge its hard-hitting lightning attacks, and for safety I even had lightning absorb on Aerith to heal from the hardest hitting attacks. And after a few minutes, victory awaits. Beating the Swordipede means heading to the roof for another boss fight right after, the Genova Dreamweaver. The Genova Dreamweaver has a lot of HP and many different mechanics all happening at the same time. Part 1 is just destroy its tentacles and damage it. Then it summons tentacles surrounding the arena and party, which can increase the range of its spells without defeating them, makes the main body immune. So slowly keep hacking away at the tentacles and eventually you can start attacking the boss again. However, it has a homing attack that should it hit you will immediately cast stop on that party member. So dodging that is essential to DPS. Finally, during the third phase, another mechanic is added, which is Acid Rain, which will slowly damage the entire party, and the Dreamweaver casts multiple homing attacks that can stop the party at once. So breaking all the tentacles, dodging all the stop attacks, and many leapfrogs later, the Genova Dreamweaver goes down, which leads to another boss fight right after. Rufus Shinra versus Cloud.
You're a soldier, aren't you? Which, of course, would mean that I own you.
Ex-soldier. I quit.
This fight sucks as a Toad, straight up. They're the only boss fights so far that I lost against. Not cool. Rufus and Darkstar, his dog, team up against Cloud, and first and foremost you must defeat Darkstar before doing anything else. Their combo attacks are so annoying to deal with and do a lot of damage. I like to use lightning-based attacks, so in my winning attempt I made sure to have lightning absorb on Cloud. This fight is pure patience. You can only attack him every time he reloads his gun, and he only reloads his gun after spamming you with attacks. We do terrible damage, we can't hit our full combo because when he reloads he's so far away. The strategy I used was just block and hope he's close enough to you to hit him with your tongue, and then use a leapfrog before he can reload and finish the animation. He actually doesn't have much health, but you can barely ever get damage in, so it just takes so long, and you have to heal so much because he will just chip away at you non-stop.
Hey, screw it. We gotta go back. What, Red? Get down!
Next is another boss fight right over that one where you play as Aerith, Barret, and Red 13. The Arsenal, which is a very long boss fight. It starts off with the Arsenal being protected by barrier drones that have a crap ton of HP. If you can stop the Arsenal from firing by attacking its main cannon, Red will instantly stagger a barrier drone, making it easier to defeat. However, actually stopping it from using primary fire is pretty tough, as you need to be right next to the boss in order to predict it, and then have Barret use a leapfrog twice and Aerith use it once, and after another hit or two from your basic combo, you're just barely able to deal enough damage to stop it from using primary fire. After the drones are defeated, the real fight starts. The Arsenal has a ridiculous amount of HP. It also changes its resistance types based on what it's being hit by. The Toads already do terrible damage, but then the boss will put on physical resistance, meaning that the Toads are forced to use bubble breath for any meaningful damage. Then it will switch back to magic defense, making Aerith useless since she does no physical damage. The main strategy that I came up with was to attack as a team, and then when the Arsenal used Firewall, that would always single out one character. I would basically sacrifice that character and attack the boss's back as much as possible with the other Toad. Same thing if the Arsenal used Pulse Cannon. Usually you're supposed to hide behind debris to dodge this attack as it is an instant kill, However, the fight took so long that I ran out of debris to hide behind, so whoever was being targeted by the attack was dead. I would just switch and attack as much as possible while it was charging and firing. The end of the fight sees the Arsenal use one last attack, Cry Havoc, to instantly kill the party. With no cover and no way to dodge, the only thing to do is destroy the boss before it can land the attack. I have no idea if you can actually die here, as I've never have, but I was so scared in the last 30 seconds, just waylaying away with leapfrogs. But finally, after over 30 minutes, the Arsenal is beaten.
So then, what is this ragtag group of misfits I see before me? Avalanche!
Local florist.
Lab rat dog.
And where are the rest of you? Up your ass. Come on, you see the piece of shit we're driving here?
Says the 300-pound sack of it.
Hey!
After some cool cutscenes, the boss rush is finally put on pause for about 15 minutes while you do the final motorcycle minigame and boss fight. Then it's right back to it. Chapter 18
Destiny's Crossroads
is the final chapter of Remake and consists of only the final boss fights. An ultimate battle against the Whispers is a lot more spectacle than combat challenge in my opinion. It wasn't easy by any means and I had to heal more than a few times, however it is very beatable. You start off as Cloud, Tifa, and Barret fighting the 3 smaller Whispers, and then the party is split up a few times as you slowly damage and stagger each Whisper to damage the health bar of the gigantic one in the distance. Eventually Barret and Red split up and you are left with Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith fighting the Whispers, and eventually Whisper Bahamut. Now here's where I have to put a disclaimer. This all counts as one fight. The cutscenes in between even still have the battle menu up, and it gives no option to change gear like it does in other multi-part boss fights. There are only 3 enfeeblement rings in the game. I think you see where this is going, and you have probably seen it from the footage. Aerith is not a toad for the last part of this fight. I had no way of making her a toad. Since I had the toad rings on the first 3 characters you use for the first half of the fight, to combat this, I just didn't play as her at all during the final part of the fight. If you want to say run invalid, by all means go for it, but those are the limitations of the game. I could have put the ring on her, but then Barret or Tifa would have been a human instead. Anyways, after beating back the Whispers, one final challenge awaits this run: Sephiroth.
Let's finish this.
Sephiroth is really hard. The whole challenge is building after this. Literally everything else in the game was nothing compared to this fight, and I'm not being hyperbolic. Being a toad nerfs you so hard in this fight, you barely get to play most of the time. He's so fast and so aggressive and hits so hard. A lot of the battle is spent healing or waiting for tiny moments to actually hit him. It is an endurance fight to the absolute extreme. Usually in the fights my levels and leapfrog help out a lot, and Sephiroth just doesn't care. Leapfrog does almost nothing, basic attacks do nothing, and as you gain party members throughout the fight it actually gets harder as he gets more aggressive and has way longer combos. Instantly attacks whatever character you switch to. It's crazy. My first attempt at Sephiroth, I got to the end of the fight after 30 minutes of slowly whittling him down, constantly healing my party, and the toads just couldn't do enough damage and I lost to his instant kill attack. I'd never seen the animation before, so that was cool, but wow, I have to redo the whole thing and come up with an actual strategy, which I did. First, my team was taking way too much damage, barely holding on, using tons of ATB on healing. I combated this by having magic absorb on the armor of 2 of my characters, Cloud and Aerith. Sephiroth has form changes where he uses different types of magic and spams them constantly with no let up, even following up sword combos with instant level 3 magic. I used that to my advantage as I was able to heal quite a bit from those combos with magic absorb on my armor. I made sure to dodge his most hard-hitting attacks to the best of my ability and just hold block and eventually attack with my ATB. I also tried to make sure my team was always at pretty high HP using items as well, because the final phase of this fight is rough. For the final phase, I mostly used Tifa at the end since she was doing the most damage. Basically, Sephiroth uses a move called Heartless Angel, and if it hits, it reduces the entire party to 1 HP. You can just barely escape with one of the toads usually, although it's not very consistent. I got hit many times. He ends the fight by summoning Meteor, and you have to beat him before his countdown ends or you lose. And he will use hard-hitting attacks and Heartless Angel during this phase. So my goal was just to use Tifa and destroy his HP as much as possible. After getting hit by Heartless Angel twice and having 2 of my party members at 1 HP, I pushed Sephiroth with Tifa, used the last of my TB on Cloud and Aerith, and leapfrogged for the victory. And the challenge is done. My final thoughts on the challenge: I wouldn't say this is a fun challenge or even very worth it. It was interesting to see that something like this is even possible in the game, and with the rings in the game and the way the toads were designed, I bet the developers definitely had something in mind for this kind of playthrough. The hit registration with Leapfrog is actually so bad, and it never hits, and it always annoyed me when it would miss, just extending the length of the challenge every time. Beating some of the late game bosses is rewarding, but also pretty shallow because unlike other challenge runs in games that I've done, there isn't much skill involved, just patience. Anyways, if you want to try this challenge, I'd recommend using chapter select and fighting the bosses you want to fight as a toad, and not do what I did and play the entirety of the game as a toad. If you want to see more videos like this, I do have a PS5 and can play the Yuffie DLC as a toad, or maybe even try a hard mode run as a toad, or maybe just fight Sephiroth again on hard mode or something like that if you guys would be interested in seeing that. Or if you want to see me beat other games in the wrong way or do challenge runs, that sort of thing. Play a lot of different games, so just drop a comment and let me know. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. This took me so long. I love you, you're the best. Make sure to like if you liked, subscribe to the channel for more videos, and I'll see you all in the next one. Have a great day. Peace.
Careful now. That which lies ahead does not yet exist.